So to strain the kefir, I have a glass measuring cup here. That's like one of the bigger vessels I have, which I can strain into, and then I have a plastic one into which I'll usually strain my yogurt and put it into fridge. Now for straining itself, I do not use anything that is metal. I use a plastic strainer and a plastic spoon, as you can see here. So this one's my daily drinking kefir. I don't intend to separate the whey from the kefir. So I'm just gonna be putting everything in and helping it through the strainer, through the sieve. So you can see that initially there was like a little bit of a watery situation, and now it's coming out in blobs. Since it's kind of quite thick, I will help it through in between with the spoon. What you're seeing here, like little grains, those are basically the kefir grains that have sat and grown in it. So you would need to help it through a little bit because obviously kefir tends to become creamy. You'll see that once you have your kefir grains well established. So I'm just stirring it through, and that just helps the kefir go through the strainer. So now you can see that the grains are more visible once the kefir is kind of strained through. And yeah, I'm just going to strain the rest of the kefir through, and then we'll see after that. Alright, so now I've strained the kefir out, and these are like all the grains remaining. They're like really plump and tend to grow really fast. So what I'm going to do is add the grains back to the bottle that I was using. You don't need to necessarily wash the bottle between uses. I wash it out, clean it out every week versus every day. The idea is to keep the kefir grains away from as much water as you can, especially chlorinated water. Kind of doesn't work to their advantage at all. So I'm gonna add the grains back into the bottle. I land up snacking on this also quite a bit. It's not for everyone. It's got a little bit of a gummy-ish texture going on, but an occasional snipeness. Tastes a little bit like solid kefir, if you will. Now when I say it tastes like solid kefir, don't think of the store-bought ones. Those taste really different from the ones that you can make at home. I don't know how much of this is true, but the process of making kefir commercially has varied from the traditional process quite a bit, is what I was reading recently. So kefir grains, kefir, all of it combined together apparently has around 100 plus. I initially saw the number to be 20, but then I was reading some research papers about it, and it turned out that between different strains of different regions and all of those things, when you have healthy kefir grains, you have almost 100 plus beneficial bacteria, yeast, and fungi that resides in the grains and the kefir together. Okay, now that I've moved the grains into the jar again. I'm going to add milk back into it. It is important to leave some space on the top. Kefir does generate carbonation, so it will tend to spill. Now for the amount of grains I have here, this is, you can see it's like around 1/3 of the bottle. I can afford to pour a lot of milk in. I use whole milk. Sorry for showing the brand here, but I do use whole milk, and you do not boil the milk that you're using for kefir. So I'm pouring up to the mark that I have, and then I'm just going to stir it really well to ensure that the grains are distributed throughout the milk, or else they tend to kind of all just bunch up on the top around at this part, and or like here, and you'll have kefir below and milk above, which is kind of not a desirable situation. Nothing wrong with it, but when you're aiming for kefir, you don't want milk and then kefir and have to mix it all up and deal with it all over again. So I've mixed the milk and kefir grains together really well, and I'm just going back and putting my cloth over it, securing it with the rubber band. So the reason why I'm not putting a lid on it is that kefir does like to breathe as it's doing its thing, so this kind of helps them. I've seen that. I did try initially with having the lid of the jar on. The process itself takes longer, and the quality per se seems to differ from what you would want. So now you can see that the grains are like throughout, and I've changed it out. So now this one will sit for another day, 24 hours, and then I'll strain this out again. Now in terms of temperatures when making kefir, kefir grains do not like extreme heat. So anything above 90 Fahrenheit, they will start dying. Anything below 60 Fahrenheit, they tend to go slowly dormant. They're not going to go instantly dormant. I do have a couple of batches that I always keep in my fridge. They work, but they work slowly, so that way I can control my kefir grain production. Tends to go really fast. Now as far as when making kefir, keep it away from direct sunlight, keep it in a relatively cooler place. It doesn't necessarily care if it's dark or not, just away from direct sunlight.